Queen Elizabeth Way. Eh? Alright, we're talking Queen Elizabeth Way. We are making our first foray into Canada. We're also talking Gardiner Expressway in Toronto as well. The Queen Elizabeth Way was named after the Queen Mother, actually, not Elizabeth II. Grab yourself a nice moose head or a bag of milk and put on your toque and turn on some Tragically Hip, and let's enjoy some Canada. So have a seat on the Chesterfield. All right, let's take a look at the route. The Queen Elizabeth Way itself goes from Toronto down to the border of the United States, right by Buffalo, New York, where the Chiefs will be taking on the Bills this week. And we're also going to be talking about the Gardner Expressway through Toronto itself. You're watching Control City Freak. This is the YouTube channel where we talk about interstate highways and the places that they're signed to go to. If you dig this kind of content, why not give us a like? And if you really like it, why not subscribe? Yeah, subscribe. Or, even better, why not join the Patreon? We've got a deal going up until the end of the year where if you sign up now, you will get a $5 super like for free for the life of the time that you have the account. So check that out. Or you can also request an exit the old-fashioned way by doing a $5 super thanks super sticker. And check the video description for upcoming video details there. I don't know how skaters and podcasters wear these things all the time. It's too hot. I don't really know what direction this road goes because it goes in kind of a weird loop, but we're going to say southbound. We're going to start with southbound. So we're starting in Toronto. I'm trying to say that correctly. I have many friends from T-Dot, and I know that nobody says Toronto. They could definitely tell that person's not from Canada or Ontario. Generally, if you say Toronto, maybe it can pass, but if you just say Toronto, then they really know you're legit. But anyway, try to say it as right as I can, and here is the beginning of the Gardner Expressway in said city. Looks like they are doing a bit of construction here at the Lakeshore area. This is what Lakeshore Drive looks like going under the Gardner Expressway at its start. We get onto the Gardner and we see a pretty good skyline view already, so that's pretty nifty. And as we head more into downtown, we can see the CN Tower standing there. And here is the main drag of Toronto, Yonge Street, the most well-known street in Canada, and one of the longer streets from what I understand, and it goes right through the heart of downtown. Here's what it looks like kind of on Yonge Street, looking north from the Gardner Expressway as it heads through town. And this is a pretty cool view here on the Gardner. I don't know really anything in the US that quite compares to this. This is just skyscrapers built right on top of the road. It's pretty cool looking. And we pass right by whatever they're calling Maple Leaf Gardens these days. And yes, I know this was never Maple Leaf Gardens. I don't care. And now we get a good view of the Sky Dome and the CN Tower. So that is pretty iconic Toronto right there. Here's another look at the Sky Dome. I gotta say, as a Kansas City Royals fan, I don't have much to be proud of, but beating that 2015 Toronto team in the ALCS, that was one of my favorite baseball memories ever. Man, I hated that Blue Jays team. Here's what it looks like at random exits on the Gardner. We just get Gardner East and Gardner West. No other control cities given. And here's a digital sign that was not legible by Street View, but I'm sure when you're driving on it, it makes a lot more sense. We get an exit here for Lakeshore Boulevard, and the Gardner Expressway is just signed west, still no control city whatsoever here on pull-throughs. And once again, random interchanges, just Gardner Expressway west. Here's the end of the Gardner Expressway. We are going to be meeting the start of the Queen Elizabeth Way, the QEW, as it is always signed, 427 to 401 and Browns Line, also to the airport. Here's where we're getting our actual split for 427, and we are going straight on the QEW for Hamilton. Does make sense from this part. Coming from the 427, we get Gardner Expressway Toronto, QEW for Hamilton and Niagara, so they throw Niagara up on there too. We're meeting Dixie Road shortly. Is it Dixie in Canada? I guess this area of Canada would be the Dixie of Canada. It's about as far south in Canada as you get. And at random interchanges, the QEW is signed for Hamilton at this point, which again, I agree with. Hamilton is a big city in that area. Probably should have its own NHL team by now. And we have merged with the 403. It was a Y intersection. We didn't have a chance to get onto 403. And we see we are signed QEW and 403 for Hamilton. This takes us to our first exit request. This was requested by Jordan Simpson on the Patreon for his free monthly request, and he wanted to see the Guelph line exit off of the QEW. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And we also see Hamilton downtown, 403, 3 kilometers ahead. Here is where the QEW and the 403 are going to split. So 403 is signed for Hamilton downtown and Brantford, QEW for East Hamilton, because we don't really get into Hamilton, and Niagara and Fort Erie. Fort Erie? I wonder what that is. And here on this random interchange, we are getting QEW for Niagara, so that makes sense. We cross this awesome bridge, the Skyway. This was originally built in the 1950s for one of the directions, and then the other direction was built in the 80s. This is crossing over this little area of Lake Ontario, this little corner of the Golden Horseshoe, which is what they call this entire region of Canada. So pretty interesting. We've got an exit for Nikola Tesla Boulevard, so props to Canada for giving it to the OG instead of naming stuff after Edison that hack the way we do. Here we've got an exit for Centennial Parkway, and we've got exit and sortie. So this is the first time we've seen the French word up there too. I feel like French-speaking people, Quebecois, could probably figure out that exit is gonna mean exit here, but eh. And we are entering the regional municipality of Niagara, and this whole area is pretty well built up all along the QEW, this Golden Horseshoe thing. There's not many times to check out any mileage signs because the exits are quite close together throughout this entire stretch. It's pretty built up the whole way. Here's the food options coming up, and we've got the Canadian double here. We got a Tim Hortons and an A&W, Canadian icons both. Boston Pizza. I don't know if that exists in America. I've not seen that. Why would you name it Boston Pizza? There's plenty of famous pizza cities. Boston's famous for other foods, but not pizza. Here is a laundry list of exit kind of thing. We see these a lot of next exit instead of pull through here. We see Carlisle Street, Ontario Street, Maple Avenue is coming up in 3 kilometers, and this is our exit for Casablanca Boulevard. 150 kilometer an hour and above, we get a max fine of $10,000. Whew! Although, 10,000 Canadian dollars, what's that, 40, 50 bucks? I kid, Canada, I kid. In these parts and random interchanges, we are signed for Niagara, which does make sense. And right here, we can see kind of a little canal lake kind of thing to our right, and Lake Ontario to our left. Finally, we get a mileage sign, so we're getting St. Catharines 11, okay, good, and Niagara Falls 26, all right, awesome. And then Fort Erie 54. Fort Erie is just the border town right across from Buffalo. It's not really that big. I feel like if you're going to put a third thing on there, put Buffalo. And now we're getting Niagara Falls and Fort Erie. So yeah, we're being a little provincial by keeping it in Ontario. And an exit for the 406 coming up right here as well. And here we have a pretty towering bridge over this canal. So that's a pretty nice view here. Here's our exit for Glendale Avenue. joeljdatts wanted to see this. This is the first diverging diamond interchange in Ontario, so wanted to take a look at that. That's pretty cool. And thank you so much for your request. Really appreciate that. And we see 405 Queenston coming up in 2 kilometers. And here we're getting our exit for 405, Queenston and Lewiston, USA. I've actually not heard of Lewiston. I guess it must be in New York. QEW sign for Niagara Falls, Fort Erie, and Buffalo, USA comes on the sign now, so that's good. At random interchanges, we are signed for Fort Erie. And now we are meeting 420. Nice highway name, Canada. And it is signed for the Falls and Niagara Falls, USA. QEW is going to be signed for Fort Erie and Buffalo. And suddenly, when we turn inland a little bit, heading away from Lake Ontario, traffic dies down and we go down to 2 lanes for the first time in this road. And this kind of just looks like K10 in Kansas or something all of a sudden here. Right here, we're seeing our maximum speed is 100 kilometers per hour. And we see QEW is still signed for Fort Erie at this point. We get a pretty nifty sign here. We get Birtle Street and Thompson Road, and then we see Trucks to USA, 2.5 kilometers. Central Avenue, then Duty Free Way, nice name, and then Buffalo, only 4 kilometers away from here. Fred Herriot wanted to see Central Avenue here, the last exit in Canada before getting to the Peace Bridge to the USA. So I am happy to show this exit for you, and I really appreciate the request. Thank you. And we see Buffalo, USA straight ahead. Trucks to USA, we gotta exit off here. And here is what it looks like as we go around the Canadian immigration. And now we are heading up the Peace Bridge, and we see a pretty good view of the Buffalo skyline from here as we cross the river, the Niagara River here. Right at the border, we get the 2 flags of the 2 nations that share this bridge, so that's a wonderful thing to see. And here's what it looks like from the top of the bridge. Looks like we're already over the river, and the top of the bridge is going to be kind of over Buffalo City streets here. We head to the U.S. border check right here. This is an old street view, as all the border checks are, so it probably looks quite different from this now. And eventually, we will default onto 190 heading toward Buffalo, into downtown Buffalo. We're already in the city of Buffalo, now we're heading downtown. And a couple miles down the road, this is as good of a view as you get of downtown Buffalo, so here it is. I didn't get the stadium just because you can't really see that very well from any interstate, at least. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere in Orchard Park, so I'd rather show lovely downtown Buffalo here. Let's talk about Northbound. We are going north on 190, a sign for Niagara Falls, and we're getting exit 9, Peace Bridge, and Fort Erie, Canada. So New York is being every bit as provincial as Ontario is here. This ought to say Toronto, not Fort Erie, not literally the first place you get to. I don't think much traffic is crossing here just to go to the first place across the border. And here's what it looks like on the Peace Bridge going back the other way toward Canada. And here we see the Canadian Customs area. Again, I'm sure it looks quite different now because Street View tends to be pretty old in these parts. And right away from the first exit on the Canadian side, we're getting QEW Toronto. Boom, love it. Great job. And now we're getting QEW for Hamilton and Toronto. I'm more down with Toronto going this way because of the way we kind of skirt around Hamilton, because you don't really go into Hamilton, at least on purpose, on this specific road. If you stay on QEW, you're going to Toronto. And, you know, Toronto's Toronto. And we're meeting 420 once again for the Falls and Lundy's Lane. Okay. Coming off 420, we see QEW Toronto and QEW Niagara. Edwin Paschke wanted to see this exit for Martindale Road, and he requested this on Patreon, so I really appreciate that. And he wanted to see that because that is the exit for Lakeside Park, and he wanted to say in honor of the late great Neil Peart, who I agree was probably top 3 drummer of all time, if not top 1. And we get another nice view of Lake Ontario as we cruise along it once we're back to Lake Ontario here. And I skipped ahead back to the Skyway that takes us over this little corner of Lake Ontario and toward the eastern section of Hamilton. We're meeting the 403 once again, so the 403 is signed west for Hamilton and Brantford, and we are going to be concurrent with it heading toward Toronto. We also see the 407 express toll route coming here too. Here's a look at that interchange. So when we are on Queen Elizabeth Way, that is on the bottom right, and we have kind of 2 lanes coming across. So it looks like we're exiting one carriageway and getting on another, but we're kind of staying on the same one the whole way, just like we saw with I-97 before. And we're seeing the 401, Canada or Ontario's #1 highway, getting advertised here, 401 via 403, 1.5 kilometers away. And we're getting QEW for downtown Toronto, and 401 is first billing, even though this is not an exit for 401, it is for the 403. But they're telling you that the control city of it is, in fact, the 401. Once again, random interchanges, it is signed for QEW Ontario. And here is where the QEW is going to be ending. We have 427 and 401 exiting here, and Gardiner Expressway straight ahead, and this exit also for Pearson Airport. Actually, the only place in Toronto I've ever been is the Pearson Airport. Hilton was a lovely place. I was too tired. I really wanted to come into town, but I was so tired. I just flown from Korea, so I just had to sleep there. And we see a little bit of Canadian graffiti up there too. I wonder if that's Drake lyrics or Bare Naked Lady lyrics. And coming off the 427, we see QEW signed for Hamilton and Gardiner Expressway for Toronto, as we saw before. And we'll continue down the Gardiner once again. So here we get Lakeshore Boulevard coming up ahead, and the Toronto skyline starting to build as we head into town. We cross over the river and we can see Lake Ontario. We are now on the opposite shore of it that we were on before, so that's pretty cool. Here is a fairly new stadium. This is where the Toronto Argonauts play, along with the MLS team. So yeah, go Argos. I sure hope they have a statue of Doug Flutie there. That would be awesome. And we are getting right downtown. We see City Hall is going to be the next exit. And right here we have to take another look at the CN Tower and the Sky Dome. Cannot resist doing that. And we're getting Yonge Street once again, along with York Street and Bay Street. I'd imagine one of the bigger Toronto downtown exits coming up right here. And we looked at Yonge Street going north before. Here is Yonge Street going toward Lake Ontario. It does not have too much further to go from this point. And here is what it looks like once we're out of downtown. All the buildings have kind of gone away. And at the end of the Gardiner, you end up being able to jump onto Lakeshore Boulevard, which you've been over the entire time, or to get on the Don Valley Parkway. So we'll swing onto the Don Valley Parkway really briefly. So here's what it looks like on the Don Valley Parkway. It goes through a park, so it's got a lot of trees around it, so that's nifty. And at the end of the Don Valley Parkway, we meet the great 401. Finally, we have the choice of West and Est. And we will cover the 401 one day. I don't know when, but we definitely will get to that. Don't worry, I promise you, my Canadian friends, we will discuss that one. All right, let's talk about Todd's the way it should be for the Queen Elizabeth Way in Canada, along with the Gardiner Expressway. I'm going to say southbound. If it is in fact southbound, it should be Hamilton. I like that they signed Hamilton. That's the right thing to do. Then Niagara Falls, either way. Buffalo, I would not sign Fort Erie. I would just sign Buffalo after you're in the Niagara area. Northbound, they nail it. They knock it out of the park. They go with Toronto, which is exactly what they should do. Great job. All right, thank you so much for watching this episode of Control City Freak. I really appreciate it. And we will be back next week with 495, where I might mispronounce even more city names than I did in this one. Oh, and for my Canadian friends, I also should say sorry. I hope I got it not too badly, though. My name is Todd, and until next time, keep on trucking.